Hello, and thank you for tuning in to The Christian Skeptic. I'm your host, Sean Kerwin, and as always, it's my mission to take an honest look at our questions about Christianity through the lens of logic and reason. I'm not here to preach at you, just to start a conversation with you. I hope you enjoy the show. Well, welcome to another episode of The Christian Skeptic. I am joined today by a very special guest. Her name is Sharon Angel. She hosts the podcast, The Courage to Identify. Sharon, welcome to The Christian Skeptic.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
So you have a pretty unique background and kind of journey as to what got you where you are today. And for those listeners that are not familiar with your podcast and don't know anything about you, what's something we should know about you? Tell me a little bit about your background.
Well, I am the daughter of Christian evangelists. My grandparents were evangelists. My parents are now evangelists. My brother, sister, they're all in the ministry space. So very well versed in the Christian religion, attended so many mission trips growing up, and used to be a child host, so hosting television shows back in India. And now focused on how can I build my relationship with Christ and also express that freedom to those I encounter. Went through a very hard journey to kind of detox from the institutionalized religion, performative religion. I'm happy to say that I'm in a better place now, a place of peace and freedom, where I can advocate for the justice of others. And yeah, now my relationship and my faith is much stronger, and I'm happy to talk about that today.
Great. So India, you lived in India for a while, or you were born in India?
I was born and raised in India.
Okay.
When I was there till high school, and then I moved to Canada for about three and a half years to start my bachelor's. Almost thought that that was going to be my forever home, but after that, missionary kids, parents want you to move, so my dad came and said that we have to move to America, which I was very hesitant about because the transfer from India to Canada, the education system, lifestyle, everything was different. And after 3.5 years of being in Canada, the change was super difficult. And I had thought, okay, that's where I'm going to be, found roots and everything. And right when I was thinking that I was going to be stable in life, it was almost like all my roots were shaken and I had to move. So through a huge fit, which I don't tend to do, and I was like, you always tell us to move and you say God wants us to move. This is not fair. What am I supposed to do with my education, my career, everything that I've built, all my friendships, relationships? Do you think I'm supposed to just throw it away through a huge fit? But I did move to the States to finish my bachelor's in Texas. Chose to stick with media and cinematography because that has always been my passion. Finished my bachelor's in broadcast communication, worked at a broadcast company after that, a television network as a producer. And then I also got my master's in film and cinematography, made a documentary, and that was kind of the door toward the rest of my life, my career. So I have found my roots now in the US, in California. I have my own production company, but I do a lot of advocacy work for women and children to talk about what is their human rights and how can we step into freedom of thought, conscience, and belief. So happy to be a voice for the Indian American community here and navigate religion and culture with all of those human rights.
Okay, so I'm really glad you brought that up because listening to your podcast, that was something that interested me. You had an episode, it was titled, and I should have written this down, but it was titled, It's a Girl,
I'm sorry, it's a girl.
I'm sorry, it's a girl. That's the one. Yeah. Where you talk about how the Indian culture and the Chinese culture a little bit. And so we have two cultures now that are, heavily influenced by Hinduism, which is also something I want to kind of talk about. Your move from a culture heavily influenced by Hinduism, and I'm not too familiar with Indian culture, but I believe Taoism as well is pretty prevalent out there.
Um, yeah, a little bit of Buddhism and Muslim, Taoism, not that much, at least
Okay.
these past couple years, but yes, Hinduism.
So yeah, so I want to get to that here in a little bit of your experience moving from a culture heavily influenced by Hinduism to the West. You're talking Canada, America, which is heavily influenced by Judeo-Christian ethics. But you brought up the women's rights thing and your episode on "I'm Sorry It's a Girl" and the abortion practices of women or female children in that culture. That really touched a nerve with you. Tell me a little bit about that.
So for me personally, my parents have never kind of pushed me aside or treated me as you're a girl, so you're a liability. But in many ways, especially growing up in front of the camera, I started hosting when I was 10 years old. So my brother would also host television shows with me. And 10 years old, I really didn't know the workings of production per se. But then as I grew older, 14, 15, I had ideas. I had things that I wanted to bring to the television world in the Christian space, but I quickly saw that my ideas, my thoughts would be shut down, whereas with my brother, it would be encouraged. Now, I don't know if they were good or bad, but just the invite of let me encourage your thoughts and let me not encourage your thoughts. I think now thinking about it, I am positive that it's because I was female and that influences the culture. That influence comes from the culture itself because men are celebrated with the woman when she gets married or when she's given off to be married. There's the dowry that has to be given as she gets married. All of these cultural traditions, these rituals that has to be done because the woman is a liability. And that comes from the cultural idea that women, right from when they are born to when they have their first period, to when they get married, to when they bear a child, they're always a liability because either you're shelling out money or in the name of protecting them from society, you're spending a lot of time and energy compared to when you're raising a male child. And then also when they're giving birth to children, there is a demand that the women have to bear a male child. You would think that now, because India is becoming so modern and so advanced, those thoughts and those ideologies would decrease in the modern society. But in many ways, they're only being reinforced, which is very sad because we have education, we have women working in the tech space and many industries. But when they come home, they have these restrictions to say that because you're a woman, you always will be, when you get married, you have to bear a child. So you have to take care of a family. You are the source of emotional care and physical care. So men are more available for promotions, to go on trips, to go on, work related things, whereas women, they have to always be at home. So they're always treated as subpar, subhuman. But I always work and I always try to say that we are in a generation, we are in a modern world where we cannot have a life without two incomes to have a peaceful family, a successful family, to support children, to have a decent life. The male and the female of the family needs to bring an income. Sometimes we end up working two jobs, we end up working three jobs. But to say that, oh, I will allow her to go to work, but I will not allow her to have dreams of her own, opinions of her own, is such a age-old thought that needs to be changed. It's a mindset change and it's a mindset shift. And I think a lot of that is cultural and is also emphasized by religion as well, which is very sad.
Yeah, definitely. And I want to touch on that in a second, but I think given your transition now to Canada and then America, how much of that do you see here? Because that's often a critique, and I don't want to get too political because that's not what this podcast is about, but that is a critique that's thrown around in the political sphere that we still live in an oppressive patriarchy here in the West. So, what's your experience in that? Do we still live in an oppressive patriarchy here in the West?
I think we do. I think we do. I see
Okay.
similar aspects of patriarchy here as well. Maybe not as much on the cultural sense, because when women here, we have the independence, the financial independence, the stability to say, if I want to be free, I can work toward it and be free. Whereas I think in the Eastern culture, there are more of those cultural strongholds or those chains. The gossip and the jealousy that refrains women from setting themselves free to be independent, to go pursue their dreams. But at the end of the day, it is a mindset of a woman. If she wants to be free, she can be free. But I do see that in the Western culture here in America, because at the end of the day, if the legal systems, the laws don't give way for women to pursue their dreams, then it becomes difficult in many ways. And I also see that religion enforces the stereotypical thought that women are subpar, they always have to serve the man. And when it's not a choice of the woman to be a certain type of wife or be a certain type of woman in the family, then there's a clash of what about my dreams? They turn into bitter individuals, after they're 50 or 60, just serving the children or living through the lives of their children. And that can become a clash because they never get to live a life of their own, work on their dreams, whether it's career, in religion, or whatever ways that's possible. They never get to live their lives, and that's when they start suppressing or overprotecting their children to say, you have to be like this, you have to walk this way because that's how I was raised, that's how I did it. And that suppression just continues over generations. So yes, there is a patriarchy. Yes, I see that in the Eastern culture, but also the Western culture. And I think religion, the Christian religion, does reinforce that.
Interesting. I see your point on there being a patriarchy. I don't think it's oppressive, though. So I'm curious, and I'm just asking out of curiosity because I'm no legal expert. But you mentioned the laws here in the West help the patriarchy to oppress women. In what ways, or what laws specifically are oppressive towards women?
One thing is, so when I think about the institution or the patriarchy, one thing is for the men to be following a certain aspect of the Constitution, which was relevant maybe years ago when the Constitution was written. But it's another thing for people to allow that to happen, the people around them. So, for example, when women were allowed to open bank accounts and have credit cards, it has been great for women to stand on their own legs and to be independent. Let's say they got divorced and let's say they are single moms, they can't always be depending on a male counterpart to support themselves and their family. So, seeing that the U.S. Allows women to have their own bank accounts and have their own credit cards. Many other Eastern cultures do that as well because they see that when women advance in society, society advances as well. But there are certain things as to domestic violence. When a woman is violated, the perpetrator usually gets a less amount of sentence. And if he is white male or if he is male in general, his sentence is like 120 days, sometimes 2 weeks, sometimes, much less than what he deserves. So when you speak to women who are violated physically, emotionally, mentally, they will say that this is something that I carry for the rest of my life, but the man or the person who perpetrated me gets away with serving a sentence for just 120 days or 6 months, and then he gets to move on to his life. So I think laws in that way need to help the victim or the survivor want to hear the story of what actually happened, and also if there is no legal system, or if there's no policy, or if there's no act that the lawyers, the people representing them, can fight for, then it becomes difficult for the survivor to move on, for the victim to move on, get her justice, and also heal in a way. So I think in that ways, advancements can be made, and there are many advocates, activists working for that. But I think it also depends largely on society to push that responsibility, or push that need to want certain laws, want certain policies. So a big aspect of that largely falls on the actions of society as well.
Yeah, that's fair. But I think it goes both ways, though, too. I just pulled up the CDC statistics, and 30% of women report being in domestic violence relationships, but 25% of men do as well. And so I think we're seeing a little bit of this, and I'm not following this by any degree, but the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial that's currently going on, again, I'm not following it. I just see little tidbits here and there. But I do know that there is kind of the overarching premise of she was abusing him, not him abusing her, right? And so I don't think that the flaws in the legal system, though, are necessarily oppressive towards women here. And why I'm making this case is because I think this does spill into the religious aspect a little bit as well. So maybe we can move off the legal, because you're probably about to totally outwit me on this area, because again, I am no legal expert at all in this. But the point I am making is I don't see that the legal system is outright oppressive towards women. I will grant the argument from a patriarchy, but that's also kind of is it a cause and effect argument or a cause and grounds argument, right? Because all of society has been, for the most part, patriarchal, I guess is probably how you say it, for all of history, right? And so, well, then you can kind of, it's almost like a chicken and egg thing, right? And I'm not saying I have this all figured out, but I'm just saying when I observe this is kind of what I see is all of society for most of history, or most societies for most of history, I guess I should say, have this kind of patriarchy setup to them. We're kind of in this new experiment where, and I think it's a Judeo-Christian experiment is what it is, because I think the value comes from that men and women are made in the image of God, and the Bible asserts that, and most other religions don't assert that, right? There's many religions, especially some of the Eastern religions, where woman is a curse on man. But because we have this Judeo-Christian background, women are equal to men because both are made in the image of God. And so there's that Imago Dei aspect that I think shapes our legal system here in the West. And well, then you have to wonder, did we shape our legal system to be oppressive to women and patriarchal, or has all of society always been that way? And we're currently trying to reshape society and the legal system to be more of the Imago Dei, men and women are made in the image of God. And then it's like, well, how quickly can that happen? You know, how quickly can you turn an aircraft carrier of a culture, which is the West, with all of our political discourse and different views? And yeah, I don't know, it's making my head spin just thinking about it. But I don't know that I agree with you that the West is oppressive towards women. I agree with you that there's a patriarchy set up, but I don't know that it's there on purpose.
I don't think it's on purpose, but I do think that those who reported domestic violence crimes against themselves were women. So at least when these cases, these reports were made. Now, obviously, men also get violated. I don't disagree with that, but if there's no, like, the reporting system, right? If there's no, I don't know the legal term for this, but if you can't report a certain case, to say this is exactly what happened. And if prosecutors don't have exact verbiage to fight for the victim in the courts, then it becomes difficult for the victim and the survivor to get justice, right? Then comes you have to create a false case, or you have to create a diversion as to, okay, this happened, so we need to get justice for this aspect. But then, like, you're not addressing the core aspect of what happened to the victim. So, yes, it happens to both men and women, but whoever the perpetrator is, they need to serve their sentence. And it has to come from the angle of what did the victim go through, what did the survivor go through, and then get justice for the victim and survivor, rather than, of course, whoever did the wrong thing, whoever was a perpetrator. I think they should be reintegrated into society after they have served their sentence, after they have served their time, after they have come to a mental, emotional place of stability, because that's restorative justice, and that's Judeo-Christian principles as well, right? There is life.
Absolutely.
There is second chance for anybody who does evil, anybody who does wrong. But then when it comes to the justice system, when we live in a society, when we live in a community, then we should also be looking at, these victims who have to live their life in shame and guilt. When this person gets to serve, 3 months and then is out and he gets to live his own life, who knows if he's going to do it again? Who knows if she's going to do it again? So it's harmful not only to that victim and survivor, but it's also harmful to somebody else who that person might do it again to, because he has not or she has not served their time. So I think it's a cycle. There are several aspects to it, and I think it will take years to perfect. And I'm not even sure if you can perfect this type of restorative justice, because our society is evolving fast. Modern technology, cybercrime was never a thing 20 years ago. Now it's so easy to attack people online. And who knows, with the advancement of Bitcoin and all of that technology, who knows what is going to happen. So I think the government and the ecosystem should be able to kind of lead that justice system. And I think there is a gap there. So yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah, no argument there at all. I think you mentioned perfecting it. In some ways, I think we're moving the opposite direction of perfection with our legal system. And really, again, I'm not a legal expert, but my observation of the system is I think the people that hurt the most in the legal system is kids, especially when violent and all sorts of criminals are, like you said, being released back into society too early, or serving too short of a sentence, or the justice system fails in some way. It hurts their kids, because while men and women have somewhat of a voice in the social sphere, kids don't have any right now, and I think they're quickly losing it. And so I guess we'll transition there onto the religious side, because I know you have a lot to say about it, and I want to hear what you have to say, because I think you have some good insight here. But I've been playing with this theory about this, and so I want to run this by you and kind of see what you think about it. On the subject of pantheistic religions, one of the oldest pantheistic religions is the Mesopotamian religion, which is especially the Mesopotamian creation story. And I've been kind of mulling over the Genesis creation story and comparing this lately, but in the Mesopotamian creation story, there is this god, Marduk, who kills the goddess Tiamat, who was the kind of wicked witch of all the gods, if you will, kind of the evil queen who was ruling over the realm of the gods. And she's kind of represented by like a monster or some kind of like dragon-looking thing. And so Marduk kind of stands up as this god who is strong, who is knowledgeable, and can see everything. And he rises up among all the other gods and says, I'll kill Tiamat if you all submit to me afterwards and make me king of the gods. And so he does. He kills Tiamat, and then he opens her up, and from her remains, he creates the known world, is how the legend goes, right? And it's very different, obviously, from the Genesis story, in which the Genesis story, God speaks into the void of voids, right, and creates things, and he creates things for 6 days, and everything he creates is good. And then he creates man and says it's very good, right? And so the reason I've been playing with that is because in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, which is one of Friedrich Nietzsche's works, he has this parable of the death of God. And this madman's running around and trying to find God until someone finally grabs him and says, don't you know we've killed God, right? And it's this kind of philosophy that, and he was spot on when he said it, because he was looking at the Western culture, and, he was around in the late 1800s in Germany. And of course, he predicted the totalitarian movements and atheistic waves that would just rock Europe and Russia to the core decades later, right? Obviously, we know communism and the Nazi regime are responsible for millions and millions of deaths. But kind of the underlying philosophy in that is similar to the Mesopotamian creation story. Because what Nietzsche says is we've killed God. What we're doing is we're trying to kill Christianity, but then we're also trying to use it, kind of like Marduk did with Tiamat. We kill God, and then we construct society out of his remains. And so that's kind of the idea I've been playing around with, is I think that that's where we're headed here in Western culture, right? I think, and even with kind of this like rebirth of spirituality that a lot of people have, I think we're trying to kill the Christian God, but then make a society that has Christian values, especially the value of compassion, and especially the value of lifting up the lowest members of society, right? Which is a very, very Christian value, And so that's kind of the idea I've been playing around with. I guess, what are your thoughts on that, as far as moving from India, the culture you were in, coming to America, advocating for women's rights? I know I'm asking a very big question right now. Yeah, the floor is yours.
Okay, you've given me a lot there. That's very interesting about the Mesopotamian beginning. I've never heard that before, but looking at America right now, I think it's very true. I'm kind of thinking out loud here.
That's what this podcast is for. Go for it.
It's very true that most people are trying to redefine spirituality or redefine themselves by associating themselves to a certain aspect of spirituality, both religious and non-religious. Let me give you a little bit of my example per se, a little bit of my background as well. I did grow up in that, PK atmosphere. For me, it was evangelist kid. So I didn't really grow up in the church or anything, but listened to thousands and thousands of messages, attended so many events, went on so many mission trips. So after a certain point, it just becomes redundant, right? You go on stage, you go sing, you go do worship. It all becomes same. And I think, to be very fair, honest, and transparent, I lost my loyalty to Christ. And that kind of turned into loyalty to people, the schedule, agenda, how things must run. So that's why I think moving to a different country kind of set me free. It's now like this an ocean of things that I can, like dive into, pick and choose, leave, and then I could come out as a completely different person, and that's fine because I have the space to do that, right? I understand many people don't have that, but I had that privilege and I didn't want to just take it for granted, but it was scary. It was scary because who knows who I'm going to come out as. But that has been wonderful because that kind of takes away, it took away, like it kind of like stripped me from this performative religion, these rules, these traditions, these rituals that I had to do because I was a child of these evangelists, because I'm an Indian Christian woman, because I'm a girl in this country. It stripped me from all of these must do and should do things to force me to have a relationship with Christ because I knew at that point that if I did not have a relationship with God, then I am just going to sink and become this blob of nothing. And I don't know where that came from. And I think that now, trying to think about it, that was my gut feeling, that was my conscience, because that was the core of who I was. And that was one thing that I could not give up. Now, on top of that, were all of these performative layers? Yes. So, my biggest thing was to kind of distance myself, divorce myself from all of these rituals, traditions, culture that was hurting me or blocking me, stopping me from finding who this God is, who this creator is. Who is this God who says, I will neither slumber nor sleep? Who is this God who says that I will renew your mind? What does that mean? What does salvation mean? I had to kind of go into all of that and find out for myself. And then coming out God and the Trinity, it's because in a different way, we all see God in is the Christian will the answer answer is very difficult.